Hey guys, it is Wingy here and welcome to another episode of Ranking Doctor Who, the series that is pretty much self-explanatory. This time out, we are going to be talking about the regeneration scenes of each of the Doctors. So in this list, as always, I'll be going from worst to best, and in this I am specifically talking about the regeneration scene. Not the actual story itself. I'm not ranking the regeneration stories because in fact this list would be in a very different order if that were the case. So the worst regeneration scene without a shadow of a doubt has got to be Colin Baker into Sylvester McCoy in Time and the Rani. It's shit. There's no way to sugarcoat this. And listen, I have every sympathy for the production team as to why this ended up the way that it did. For those of you who don't know, behind the scenes circumstances with Colin Baker after he got fired meant that he was not going to come back for his regeneration scene. And do you know what? I don't blame the guy. However, the solution of the outgoing Doctor not actually being there for the regeneration scene is not stick the new fella in the old guy's costume as well as a wig and pretend that that's the old guy. Let's just say there was a slight size difference between Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy, mostly in height that I am actually referring to, and you can clearly see that that is Sylvester lying there on the floor. Plus, not only that, you don't actually know why the Sixth Doctor regenerated, and I know that Big Finish have gone on and explained it in a wonderful story, I'm sure. I've not actually heard it, but let's face it, to everyone looking in, he fell off his exercise bike and he hit his head on the TARDIS console. The actual regeneration effect, I don't mind. I think it's actually pretty good, but in terms of the way that the scene is presented and is executed, I can't look past its shabbiness, even though I am well aware of why it is the way that it is. Next, I'm going to go with John Hurt into Christopher Eccleston in Day of the Doctor. Now, the reason why this is here, I'm going to keep this fairly brief, because there's no real reason as to why the War Doctor regenerates. I think they explain it as if, well, he's now the Doctor, so he doesn't need to be the War Doctor anymore. The war's over for him, so he can change. Alright, it's not really explicit, he just kind of starts regenerating. Plus, it's just an unremarkable regeneration scene. It's a generic regeneration energy that we've seen throughout the new series. The War Doctor just stands there and he changes, and you don't even get to see the new Doctor's first lines. Obviously, I understand why, but yeah, it's not really anything special. I don't even think it was 100% necessary. I feel like we didn't need to see the War Doctor change in the 50th. Next, we are going to go with David Tennant into Matt Smith during the End of Time Part 2. Now, you guys know how I feel about the End of Time. I don't like it as a story, and listen, the thing that I hate about this regeneration scene is I don't feel the emotion that it's trying to present. And listen, I understand that many people out there absolutely understand and feel that emotion of the 10th Doctor as he's regenerating and the whole impact of the line, I don't want to go. However, I hate that line. The fact that the Doctor has changed plenty of times before, and this one is like, I don't want to go. It just, I don't know. Considering how selfless some of the other regenerations are, the fact that this is a selfish one, I understand why to a certain extent, but I also don't like that aspect of the Doctor's character. And I know that some people are going to say, well, the Doctor was going into his last regeneration, so he thought, so that's why he didn't want to go. And yeah, you can explain it away with that, but that was added after, during the production of The End of Time. That wasn't a thing. So yes, whilst the whole Time of the Doctor explanation makes that line less over the top, I still don't like it for what it is. Personally, I feel like the 10th Doctor could have had a much better regeneration. I feel like he should have gone out in a more heroic way. He just seems a bit pitiful and pathetic, if I'm being totally honest. Then we are heading back to the classic era, and we are going to be going with Jon Pertwee to Tom Baker during Planet of the Spiders. Now again, similar to the John Hurt regeneration, there's nothing particularly wrong with this regeneration, it's just kind of there. It's an unremarkable regeneration again, and I think the reason why I'm not particularly keen on this regeneration scene is, again, I feel like Jon Pertwee deserved better, and second of all, I don't like the fact that the Doctor needs a little push with his regeneration. He kind of just dies, and then there's this other guy who's like, yeah, I'll make sure that you regenerate, and then he does. I kind of wish that the Doctor just changed. I understand that it was written into the story and everything, but I'm not too keen on it personally. The actual regeneration effect itself is a bog standard fade effect, which again is fine. I think it was done better in previous incarnations to this one. And yeah, overall, I just feel like Jon Pertwee's Doctor goes out with a little bit of a whimper. Now, the next one, I didn't really want to put as far down as I have because it's a very noteworthy regeneration. But at the same time, I do prefer the others for various different reasons. So, unfortunately, I'm going to have to go with William Hartnell to Patrick Troughton in The 10th Planet. Now the reason why this is here is because I do genuinely prefer the others from here on out, is the top and bottom of it. However, what I will say is this is arguably the most genius, inventive and wonderful things that ever happened in the history of television. Now that might sound over the top and dramatic, but if you think about it, at the time, William Hartnell was going to leave Doctor Who. There is a few things that people most likely would have done in that situation, and instead of go for the obvious, which was get somebody else and dress them up like William Hartnell and pretend that this is the same guy, or you could have ended the show right there and then. Somebody thought, actually, let's just fuck it off entirely and cast somebody totally different. Now I imagine the original idea was to get someone to portray the Doctor as a younger version of the William Hartnell Doctor. I imagine that was the main thing. Obviously, it would later change and the Doctor would regenerate into a totally different person each time, probably because of Patrick Troughton's influence on the part, which was vastly different to William Hartnell's. But the fact that this happened in the first place was genius. This scene, I think, is brilliant for what it is. I think it's fantastic, and it is the reason why Doctor Who survived as long as it did and is still going to this day. However, the regeneration itself is okay, as in the transition. I really like that it whites out and then you just slowly see Patrick Troughton. The only gripe that I have with this scene, and maybe it's just because I was a stupid kid, but the first time I saw it, I didn't actually notice the difference between Hartnell and Troughton because of how the screen looked, because it was so whited out. Maybe that was just me, but either way, I would have wanted to put this higher, but I do prefer the others. Then we are going to go to Tom Baker into Peter Davison from Legopolis. Now I had a long hard think about this. I do, as a story, really like Legopolis, and I do like a lot of what the regeneration scene does. However, there are 3 people in this scene that I think totally fucking ruin it. And they are Janet Fielding, Sarah Sutton, and Matthew Waterhouse. Also the director as well. Now the reason why I say this is because I actually quite like the idea of the Watcher. I think it's a really unique and weird idea. The fact that this half regenerated incarnation of the Doctor travels into the future and then merges with their previous self to become the next Doctor. I think that's a genius idea, actually. I never want to see it again, but I like it as a one-off. I love the build-up where Tom falls off of the thing. I love the music in this. I think it's brilliant. I love the little callbacks to all the different companions and all the different villains. But then at the same time, you've got his current 3 companions who aren't acting very well. And the way that they come into the scene and the way that they surround Tom, it looks like a theatre production. It doesn't look natural, the way that they gather around him and sit across him and look at him as he's dying. And the overacting of how they all say the line, Doctor, is just cringeworthingly bad. Again, I kind of feel like Tom deserved better. Personally, maybe Tom should have regenerated alone, and that moment would have been more impactful for the audience as opposed to seeing Tom surrounded by people that, let's be fair, his Doctor barely fucking knows or cares about, and they awkwardly deliver their lines and gather around him in a stupid way. I quite like the way the Watcher merges and you see the Doctor's face change into the Watcher, then you see Peter Davison with a load of gunk and shit on his face, and then he's sort of born out of his cocoon into the 5th Doctor. I think that's brilliant, but it's just all the other stuff really lets this scene down for me. Next up we have what I think, because I haven't seen series 12 so I don't know what the fuck's going on, but as far as I'm aware, the latest regeneration, which is Peter Capaldi into Jodie Whittaker from Twice Upon a Time. Now this scene I like. I don't love it, but I think it's okay. I really like the fact that this Doctor is talking to his future self and he's saying like, right, okay, there's some rules and you need to do this and you need to do that. There's a line in particular that I love, and I remember specifying this in my review of Twice Upon a Time as well, where the Doctor says, well, I suppose one more lifetime wouldn't kill anybody, well, except me. That piece of dialogue I think is fantastic. I think that would probably be my favourite last words from any of the Doctors, had Capaldi then not gone on and kept fucking talking. Now the thing is, I do like the speech after that moment, but I feel like that was the perfect final line that they just ruined. Doctor, I let you go is stupid. I don't like the whole shit of, oh, if the stars are aligned, children can hear your name, that sort of bullshit. I think that's a bit off. I quite like the fact that when he's just talking, he's like, oh, never be cruel, never be cowardly, laugh hard, run fast, that sort of stuff I quite like. But I feel like this is a much weaker version of Matt Smith's regeneration. I feel like Capaldi deserves slightly better. This is not the worst regeneration scene by any stretch of the imagination, and I do actually quite like the fact that his regeneration itself is so fucking huge inside the TARDIS. I also like the fact that whilst he's waffling on wandering around the TARDIS, he is noticeably getting weaker as well. Like I said, I just really wish that, I suppose, one more lifetime wouldn't kill anyone except me were his last words. I think that would have been perfect for Capaldi's Doctor. Next we go to Sylvester McCoy into Paul McGann in the TV movie. I actually really like this one, like surprisingly really like this one. I think because it's quite weird in terms of the circumstances leading up to McCoy's death and the fact that he's in a hospital, in a morgue, and he has to wake up, that's actually pretty dark and funny to me. I really like the actual sequence as well, where you see his face literally warping and you see Sylvester gurning on the table. I actually quite like all the different lightning bits and pieces that are surrounding the Doctor whilst he's regenerating. I do think it is a little bit too dark that the Doctor was shot and then died on the operating table, but it does, like I say, play for quite a comedic moment when the 8th Doctor then naturally is going to have to break out and then someone sees him and just collapses and is like, oh my god, it's a zombie. It is also a little bit cheesy, but I do quite like the fact that one of the security guards or one of the medical staff there, whoever it is, I love how he's watching Frankenstein's monster. It's like, oh, he's coming to life just as the Doctor is regenerating and then breaks out of the thing. It is a little bit goofy and a little bit cheesy, but I actually quite think it makes it a nice little moment. Yeah, overall I just enjoy it. I think the special effects for it look pretty decent for the 90s, and it is a very noteworthy regeneration actually, in my opinion. And if my maths is correct, we have 5 more regenerations left. I don't actually know how many Doctors there are nowadays because it seems like there's fucking tons of them. But next we are going to go to Patrick Troughton into John Pertwee from the War Games. Now the reason why I love this one, I just think it's brilliant that the Doctor was forced into a regeneration by the Time Lords because they were like, yeah, you interfere too much, you just need to have a bit of a time out on Earth for a bit. I also like the fact that they give the Doctor the option of this is who you could be, and the fact that he just goes off on one is like, oh, he's too young, he's too old, he's too fat, he's too thin, oh, that won't do at all. I really like Patrick Troughton's proper, like, well, if I'm going to change, I'm going to do it properly type attitude. The second Doctor in this scene feels very much like the second Doctor. I know that sounds a little bit stupid, but it makes sense in my head. He goes out the way that he lived, kind of thing. And also I love the fact that eventually, because they've had enough of his shit, they're just like, we're gonna make you change anyway. And I really love that effect. It is so 1960s, of where you see one Troughton and then they start spinning and then there's like all of them and they all start warping together and everything. I just think it's such a unique an interesting way to do a regeneration sequence. Obviously this was the second time we would have seen it as well, so they could have easily just done the whiteout thing again, but they decided not to. They decided to be a little bit creative about it, which I fucking love. One thing about the new series I really hate is that every single regeneration is the same. I get why, I do understand it, but I love the fact that they were just like, yeah, well, William Hartnell changed a few years ago, it was just a whiteout effect, should we do that? No, let's just have multiple versions of Patrick Troughton all separate from each other and do a load of spins and shit. Why the fuck not? Next, it's Paul McGann into John Hurt from Night of the Doctor. It is Night of the Doctor, isn't it? Yeah, it's Night of the Doctor. I mean, considering that this whole thing is a story in itself that was like a mini-sode for the 50th, I think is brilliant. The fact that they even brought McGann back, because they didn't need to. I think many Doctor Who fans could have, well, I don't think they could have lived without it, but most people would have been like, yeah, we'll never get to see it, there's no point, it's too late now, like, McGann played the Doctor years ago on screen now, like, there's no point. But no, they went and did it. What I love about this as well is you really see the 8th Doctor in a way that I think most people kind of choose to forget in the TV movie. I think because a lot of people don't like the TV movie, I know that they like McGann, but I feel like with this, because it was such a surprise, they were more happy to see him, as opposed to in the TV movie everyone was just kind of like, yeah, this is weird American bullshit, who's half human all of a sudden, and Eric Roberts, blah blah blah. I like that this sort of stripped away all the bullshit that was surrounding Paul McGann's Doctor on screen before, and you just had to love him for 6 minutes and then he goes. Like in this, he's witty and he's charming and he clearly knows that he's dying, and again I like the fact that the Doctor has a choice, and I kind of get the impression that the 8th Doctor somewhat breaks towards the end of this scene as well, where he's like, this war doesn't need a Doctor anymore, make me a warrior, and then asks, will it hurt? And they're like, yeah, and he's like, good. I also love the fact that he name drops the Big Finish companions as well, which in my head and a lot of people's heads, they were canon anyway, but the fact that he actually named them on screen, they're definitely canon now. The 8th Doctor adventures really fucking happened in the Doctor's timeline. This was such a wonderful treat for the fans. Like I say, everyone had sort of written this off, nobody thought this was going to happen, but the fact that we got it and that it's brilliant, and to this day it is only the second appearance of Paul McGann, it's amazing. I love it. Top 3 then, and to start off the top 3, Christopher Eccleston into David Tennant from The Parting of the Ways. This was the first regeneration that I ever saw, and let me tell you something, I was well fucking confused. I mean, I don't know how old people are watching this video. You might be the same age as me, you might be a little bit younger. Either way, when you see your first regeneration, it is a little bit confusing, because especially if, like me, you only knew one doctor at that time, when they then leave, you're just kind of like, but I liked you. Why have you, who's this knobhead that's come in? Everybody goes through that cycle, and it's pretty funny. I think the first one is always the worst as well, but the reason why I put this one in third place is, well, frankly, I prefer 2 others, but also, it was the whole build up to it. Like, I didn't know that Eccleston was leaving. I know that it was pretty much announced just as Series 1 was coming out, but I didn't know about that. I wasn't buying Doctor Who magazine at that time. I didn't really watch the news. Internet and social media wasn't a massive thing in my life at that time. I mean, I was only 10. And so seeing him give this really witty and bittersweet speech, and then all of a sudden his body explodes and you're just like, okay. To be honest, I didn't know what happened. I didn't know that he changed his face. I thought maybe he was teleported away, like Christopher Eccleston's Doctor was kidnapped somewhere and this imposter played by David Tennant just came into his place. Again, I think it is a little bit self-indulgent. I think most of the new series, well, no, I think all of the new series regenerations are in fact pretty self-indulgent. I think this was the best one in terms of it's not wanking itself off. It's not the Doctor talking to the audience as such. There is the whole "you were fantastic and so was I" thing, but I feel like for the most part he's just sort of still in character, whereas all the others it feels like it's the actor talking. Now obviously, because I haven't mentioned one of them yet, I don't actually mind it with one of them. However, with this one, I do like the subtlety. I do like the fact that he's just like, don't worry Rose, everything's going to be fine, but I'm going to change my face. This is going to get a little bit weird now. Plus, the first time that you see that regeneration with the whole energy thing, it's like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, that's probably the biggest regeneration at that point that we'd ever seen. It's such a great way for the Ninth Doctor to go out. Again, similar to Troughton, it feels like 100% the Ninth Doctor in that scene. It feels like that is a defining moment for his Doctor, and sadly it came at the very end, but either way, 10-year-old me was fucking confused. I think this is one of the scenes that made me a Doctor Who fan. It's not the scene, but it definitely helped. In second place, I'm going to go with Peter Davison into Colin Baker from the Caves of Androzani. I don't know what I can actually say about this scene that I haven't already said. I mean, I love the Caves of Androzani anyway. I think it is a fantastic Doctor Who story, arguably one of the best. I've spoken about it many a time on my channel, but I think the regeneration itself really emphasises who the Doctor actually is. This is a heroic Doctor who, instead of trying to save themselves, he's saving the life of a person who he barely fucking knows. And the thing is as well, what makes this scene even more impactful is 2 reasons. One, he already started regenerating like an episode and a half ago. He's been holding on to this regeneration for so long. And second of all, he doesn't know if he's actually going to regenerate at all. He might just flat out die right here and right now. Whether that's because he was holding it back, or whether he's left it too long, or because the poison will stop his regeneration, we don't actually know. But in his head, he's not even 100% confident that he is going to live through this. And yet the fact that he still chooses to save Perry and not himself is amazing. And I really, really like the way that Davison goes out in a pretty simplistic way for such a heroic moment, in the sense of he's like, is this death? And then he sees the faces of all his different companions, and then at the very end the Master's there saying like, you need to die, Doctor. And that's what he sees as he, in his mind, dies. But then no, he explodes and suddenly he's Colin Baker. It's a really tense moment. I don't really think that this is emotional. It depends on how attached you are to Peter Davison's Doctor. But for me, this was just a really incredible moment for the Doctor's character, because it shows you definitively who this guy actually is. Unfortunately, they would fuck that up in the next episode, because the woman who he's just saved, he will try and fucking murder in about 5 minutes, but forget that for now. In this moment, the 5th Doctor went out in an awesome way. I mean, forget the fact that he dropped Perry outside of the TARDIS, but also the explosions where he's walking through, that's a pretty epic moment as well. The special effects are very 80s. It is a little bit of a callback as well, with similar to Tom's, where they've got the different companions there and stuff. but I don't mind it. I quite like it. I like how they're all telling him different things as well, which is quite funny. And then yes, that leaves us with one more, again, if I've not miscounted. And that will be Matt Smith into Peter Capaldi in The Time of the Doctor. This is absolutely my favourite regeneration scene in arguably one of the worst regeneration stories that we've ever had. I don't understand it. I think for me, this scene makes Time of the Doctor somewhat more watchable. I think the story itself is a mess. I recently did a review of it as part of the Doctor trilogy, so if you haven't seen that, go and check it out. But in terms of the actual scene itself, yes, it is very self-indulgent. Yes, it feels like it is Matt Smith who is talking and not the Doctor. But the music, the directing, the dialogue, and Matt Smith's performance are fucking flawless. I am not the biggest fan of the 11th Doctor, and that's not me saying that I'm not really a big fan of him. I'm just saying this as in, he's not my favourite Doctor. He is not my Doctor. He's not the one who I will automatically think of if I think the Doctor. If I were to say my favourite Doctor in general, it's Tom. If I were to say of the modern era, it's Capaldi. Like, Matt Smith is good. I enjoy his era. I think Series 5 is a belter of a series. After that, his era is hit and miss. I think his Doctor is very hit and miss as well. I think similar to his episodes, it depends on which episode it is. I can either take him or leave him. This scene makes me the most emotional out of all the other scenes though. I think the dialogue is so beautifully written by Moffat here. I love the moment where he says, "It all just fades, doesn't it, like breath on a mirror." And again, it's the way that Matt Smith delivers those lines. He is fantastic in this scene. He hits every emotional beat in the script perfectly. But not only that, you can see that he's clearly about to change. He's clearly a little bit unsure about it. And he does what a lot of people, I think, tend to do when they're nervous, which is sort of, you know, try and make it lighthearted and jovial. I also really like the fact that he's getting a little bit deluded in his head. And Clara is obviously very confused in the TARDIS and is just sort of like, okay, what's actually going on? But in the Doctor's mind, he's looking around and he's seeing all these different drawings and he sees little Amy Pond. And then he sees the actual Amy Pond. And I think that moment of Raggedy Man Goodnight and where he takes off the bow tie is where I start to tear up. And again, Murray Gold with the music, absolutely sublime. Probably one of my favourite scores of Modern Who. This annoyed me at the time as well. However, with hindsight, I actually quite like the fact that there isn't some big explosion moment and then he becomes Peter Capaldi. I love the fact that he essentially sneezes and then he's Peter Capaldi. The reason why is because we've already had that. We had that moment like 5 minutes earlier where he's fighting off the Dalek ship and everything. And it's perfect for the audience as well because you're there, tearing up, emotional, and then all of a sudden, he's an angry old Scottish fella who is just like, we're gonna die now because I don't know how to fly this thing. That's what I think is so genius about this scene. It reminds me a little bit of John Sullivan's writing from Only Fools and Horses and other various things, but I'm particularly meaning Only Fools here. In the sense of John Sullivan could write really emotional stuff and he could still switch it at a drop of a hat and make it hysterical. And I think, whilst this is not anywhere near the level of that, I just love the fact that Moffat did that switch of, this is actually pretty emotional, and okay, it's back to funny and witty Doctor Who again. And you as the audience literally look like Clara. And that is my ranking of the Doctor's regeneration scenes. In the comments below, guys, let me know if you agree or if you disagree. How would you rank the regeneration scenes? And remember, it's specifically the final scenes, not the actual stories themselves. Time of the Doctor is not the greatest regeneration story ever. Sorry to disappoint for its fans out there and for all the rational people. I'm sorry if you thought that. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure you leave a like on it, subscribe for more. Social media and Patreon links will be in the description as always. So if you would follow me on any of those things, I would absolutely love you forever. But until next time, guys, you take care of yourselves. Goodbye.